Tokyo is the largest city on our planet. It is almost impossible to fully grasp how vast Tokyo is, with more than 41 million people living across the metropolitan area. Imagine taking the entire population of Canada and fitting them into a single urban region. Anthony Bourdain once said there were 15 or 20 different Manhattans in Tokyo. To understand how Tokyo became the world's biggest city, you have to understand just how enormous it really is. If you were standing in the center of Tokyo, say at Shibuya Crossing, how long would it take to walk to the lower density suburban areas, where people live in neighborhoods like this, and then finally reach the rural landscape where the city starts looking more like this? I went to Google Maps and looked around for the closest large green areas outside the dense urban core, places that didn't simply look like city parks. I found them roughly here. From central Tokyo, that would be about a 30-mile, 11-hour walk. And even after reaching those areas, there is still a huge amount of city beyond them. It remains remarkably dense. If you wanted to reach the mountains, you would have to walk for another 11 hours. So how do people move around a city on this scale? More than half of the 41 million people in the Tokyo metropolitan area use public transportation every day. A city this large cannot function if everyone has to sit in traffic. And Tokyo's traffic can be enormous. Public transportation across Greater Tokyo is dominated by the world's most extensive urban rail network. Here is the rail network for Los Angeles, Rome, and Delhi. Now watch what happens when we overlay Tokyo's rail system. Shinjuku Station in central Tokyo is the world's busiest railway station, according to Guinness World Records. The number of people moving through it every day is comparable to the entire population of Berlin or Los Angeles. With more than 200 different entrances and exits, the station is incredibly complicated. Even within one of the world's most efficient public transportation systems. And when you move that many people every day, no matter how many trains you operate, some of them are going to become extremely crowded. Most major cities have a central downtown area where people and activity converge. Business, shopping, entertainment, and culture all gather in one place. It is so large that many different areas function almost like their own downtown. You can be in Shinjuku, and it feels like downtown. Then you can take the metro for 45 minutes in one direction, get off, and it still feels like downtown. Take the metro another 45 minutes in another direction, and somehow you are still surrounded by what feels like another downtown. Because Tokyo does not have one single dominant downtown, its districts have developed their own identities, cultures, and atmospheres. Akihabara is the center of anime, video games, manga, electronics, and otaku culture. Its streets are packed with stores dedicated to Japanese pop culture, and you can often see cosplayers walking through the area. Harajuku is closely associated with Japanese youth culture. People come here wearing all kinds of alternative and experimental fashion. Asakusa is the temple district, filled with Buddhist temples, traditional craft shops, and festivals that preserve older Japanese traditions. Ginza is the luxury center. It has enormous department stores, high-end shopping, and even a 12-story Uniqlo. On the streets, you can find nearly every major luxury brand. In the mid-1970s, the United Nations began using the term megacity for urban areas with more than 10 million people. New York City became the world's first megacity in the 1930s, but Tokyo quickly passed it, and then passed it again and again as its population continued to grow. Tokyo also pioneered many of the systems that modern cities of this scale rely on. Just ask Jeremy Clarkson. Parking meters in Tokyo use infrared sensors, so if you return and pay for another hour, the system can recognize that your car has not moved. When traffic begins to build up, information is transmitted to drivers through enormous electronic boards positioned above major routes throughout the city. Transportation between Tokyo and Osaka was becoming increasingly difficult for the tens of millions of people living in and around those metropolitan areas. So Japan developed a solution: the bullet train. The Shinkansen was designed as a super express railway that pushed aside existing ideas about how fast passenger trains could travel. It even looked like a bullet, and it transformed travel between Japan's major cities. Japan also built what has been described as the world's largest sewer system. What makes all of this especially fascinating is that 400 years ago, modern Tokyo did not exist. There was a settlement here, but it was a small fishing village called Edo. Then, in 1603, Japan changed. The Warring States period came to an end with the victory of the Tokugawa shogunate, which unified Japan under its rule. The Tokugawa moved their de facto capital to Edo, concentrating much of Japan's political and economic power in a single city. As Edo expanded, it attracted more and more influential people from across the country. Samurai, craftspeople, and workers. Edo was also in an ideal location for growth. It was a port city situated beside the largest flat region of land in Japan. That meant the surrounding area could produce enormous amounts of food, while canals and rivers made it relatively easy to transport that food into the rapidly growing city. Edo became so large and important that the next 200 years are now known as the Edo period. Some estimates even suggest that Edo was the largest city in the world during the 1700s, with a population exceeding 1 million people. Then, in the mid-1800s, after roughly 2 centuries of relative isolation, Japan opened itself to foreign trade and Western ideas. The result was rapid social and economic change. Edo was renamed Tokyo, meaning Eastern Capital, and the city began industrializing at an extraordinary pace. Factories created new jobs, drawing millions of people from rural areas into the city. Tokyo grew by millions. The city became defined by constant change. It changed from a fishing village into the political center of Japan. It changed through industrialization, and it repeatedly changed through disaster. Tokyo suffered several devastating fires, some of which destroyed huge portions of the city. Yet each time, the city rebuilt itself and continued growing. Tokyo repeatedly rose from the ashes. Looking at Tokyo today, one of the most common things you see on social media is people talking about how cheap it is to live there. Compared with the United States, the cost of living can indeed be much lower in many respects. But there is an important detail behind those comparisons. A lot of these TikTok posts list Japanese prices in US dollars. Americans are accustomed to American prices for food, housing, and everyday expenses. So when they arrive in Japan and see how much lower many prices look after conversion, the difference can be shocking. But Japanese salaries are generally much lower as well. There is another reason Tokyo and Japan can feel strange to people looking at them from abroad: the enormous gap between Japan's image today and the image it had about 30 years ago. Look at how American news reports talked about Japan during the 1980s and 1990s. Japan was portrayed as a major economic threat to the United States. American businesses in high-tech industries were warned that competing with Japanese companies could mean going out of business. Television programs discussed the possibility that America was losing the economic war with Japan. There was a time when Japanese salaries even exceeded American salaries. Japanese automakers had captured a huge share of the American market. At one point, roughly 1 out of every 3 cars sold in the United States was Japanese. Combined with the recession, this created serious problems for American automakers. But then the trajectory changed. Japan entered a long period of economic stagnation, while the United States continued to grow and eventually pulled far ahead over the following decades. For a moment, it seemed like the Cold War had ended and Japan had won. But the story of Tokyo did not end there. The city that had grown from a fishing village into Edo, from Edo into the capital of a rapidly industrializing Japan, and eventually into one of the largest urban regions in human history, continued adapting to every new era. That ability to absorb change, rebuild after disaster, connect enormous numbers of people, and organize a city without a single traditional downtown is a major part of what made Tokyo the city it is today.